I watched a live stream on the deep web that I wasn't supposed to see. If you like the story, please consider liking it and subscribing to the channel. Also, it would be fun if you let me know what time it is when you watch it. Let's begin. It started innocently enough. I'd always been fascinated by the darker corners of the internet, places most people wouldn't dare to go. Forums filled with cryptic conversations, websites hidden behind layers of encryption, and rumors of live streams showing things no one should ever see. To me, it was thrilling. Dangerous, sure, but harmless as long as you knew your limits. That's what I thought, at least. It was a rainy night when my curiosity got the better of me. I was bored, scrolling through my usual sites when I stumbled across a post in a private forum. The title was simple, Streams You Should Never Watch. My heart raced as I clicked, scanning through the list of links. Most were dead ends, broken URLs, or streams long since taken down. But one link stood out. It didn't have a name, just a timestamp that read live now. Against my better judgment, I clicked. The screen went black for a moment, and then the stream loaded. At first, it was underwhelming, a grainy, poorly lit feed of an empty room. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling, swaying slightly as though someone had just left. The walls were bare, the floor concrete. There was nothing remarkable about it, but something felt wrong. Thousands of anonymous viewers were in the chat, their messages flying by faster than I could read. Most were nonsensical, strings of numbers, symbols, or cryptic warnings like, "Don't look too close," and "Leave now while you can." I told myself it was just part of the show, some kind of interactive performance meant to scare people. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the room was watching me as much as I was watching it. Minutes passed, and nothing changed. I hovered over the close button, ready to leave, when the camera glitched. The screen flickered, and for a split second, I thought I saw something move in the corner of the room. My breath hitched, and I leaned closer. The movement was subtle, just a shadow shifting where no shadow should be. Then it happened again. The chat exploded with messages. "It's starting. You shouldn't be here. They know you're watching." My stomach tightened. I told myself it was just a scare tactic, but a cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck. Something about the room felt too real, too personal. The shadows in the stream didn't just move. They pulsed, like they were alive. And then the screen flickered again, and a new message appeared at the top of the chat. "Welcome, Alex. You're just in time." The message froze me in place. "Welcome, Alex. You're just in time." My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear myself think. There's no way they could know my name. I had taken every precaution, private browsing, VPN, layers of encryption. Yet there it was, my name displayed in bold letters at the top of the chat. The messages kept pouring in, growing stranger and more cryptic with every passing second. "Alex, don't look at the light. They're watching you now. You can't leave." I told myself it was a coincidence, a clever trick designed to unnerve viewers. Maybe the site pulled my username from my browser somehow. But the logical explanations weren't enough to calm the sinking feeling in my gut. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the tab to close it. That's when the light in the stream flickered again. It wasn't the flicker itself that unnerved me. It was what it revealed. For just a second, there was a shadow, a faint humanoid shape standing near the edge of the frame. I leaned closer, squinting at the screen, but the figure was gone as quickly as it had appeared. The chat went wild. "Did you see it? It's here. Run, Alex." I couldn't look away. The room was still the same, a bare empty space with cracked concrete walls and a swaying light bulb. But the longer I stared, the more wrong it felt. The shadows in the corners seemed to deepen, almost as if they were reaching toward the camera. The light bulb swung faster, casting strange patterns on the walls. Then came the sound. At first, it was faint, just a low hum in the background, barely audible over the static. But it grew louder, morphing into a series of distorted whispers. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but the cadence felt deliberate, like words spoken just beyond my understanding. The sound crawled under my skin, setting every nerve on edge. The camera glitched again, the screen momentarily filling with static. When the image returned, the light bulb was still swaying, but now there were faint smudges on the walls. They weren't there before. I leaned in, trying to make sense of the shapes. Handprints, dozens of them, smeared across the walls in faint streaks, as though someone had dragged their palms along the concrete. The chat exploded once more. They're waking up. Get out while you can. Too late now, Alex. I felt cold. The kind of cold that creeps into your bones, that makes you feel like something is standing right behind you. I forced myself to look away from the screen, glancing around my room to reassure myself I was alone. Everything was as it should be. My desk cluttered with papers, the dim glow of my bedside lamp casting familiar shadows. But the atmosphere had changed. The air felt heavier, charged with static. When I turned back to the stream, the camera had zoomed in slightly. The room was closer now, the details sharper. I could see cracks in the concrete, faint stains on the floor. The handprints were clearer too, each one larger than the last. And then, ever so slowly, the light bulbs stopped swaying. The silence that followed was deafening. The whispers stopped, the static disappeared, and for a moment, the stream was completely still. My finger hovered over the close button again, but something held me back. I couldn't explain it. It wasn't curiosity, exactly. It was something deeper, more primal. A sense that if I looked away, I would miss something important. And then, without warning, the camera panned. It wasn't a smooth motion. It jerked violently, swinging to the left and revealing more of the room. The new angle showed an empty doorway, its edges dark and uneven, as though the walls had been torn apart. Beyond the doorway was nothing but blackness. The chat was eerily quiet now, as if the viewers were holding their breath. Then a single message appeared. "It's coming." A soft, rhythmic tapping echoed from the stream. It started faint, like the sound of bare feet on concrete, but it grew louder with each step. My throat tightened as I stared at the doorway, my heart hammering in my chest. The tapping stopped just out of view, and the silence returned, heavier than before. That's when the hand appeared. It reached out from the shadows, a pale, skeletal hand with unnaturally long fingers. It gripped the edge of the doorway, pulling itself into the light. I couldn't see its face, only its silhouette. It was impossibly tall, its limbs too thin, its movements jerky and inhuman. The chat came alive. "Don't let it see you, Alex. It knows you're watching. Turn it off." But I couldn't. My body refused to move. The figure stepped fully into the light, its distorted shadow stretching across the room. Its head tilted unnaturally, almost as if it were listening for something. Then, slowly, it turned toward the camera. The screen glitched again, the image warping and twisting. For a brief moment, I thought I saw my own reflection in the distortion, my face staring back at me from the stream. My blood ran cold. The chat exploded. "Alex, leave now. It's coming for you." Before I could react, the figure on the screen raised its hand and pointed directly at the camera. The stream cut to black. The stream stayed black for what felt like an eternity. I sat frozen in my chair. The lingering image of that figure pointing at the camera burned into my mind. My heart raced, my hands hovering over the keyboard, but I couldn't bring myself to click away. Something about the abrupt darkness felt deliberate, as if the stream was waiting for me to make the next move. Just as I mustered the courage to close the tab, the screen flickered back to life. The room was different now. The light bulb still hung from the ceiling, but was no longer swaying. Instead, it flickered weakly, casting long, jagged shadows that seemed to writhe against the walls. And then the host appeared. They stepped into frame slowly, their movements unnervingly smooth. They wore a mask, white, featureless, and glossy, with 2 small holes for eyes. The rest of their body was covered in black, blending into the shadows around them. For a moment, they stood perfectly still, their head tilted slightly as though listening. The chat lit up. "It's them. Don't look too long. They can see you, Alex." I swallowed hard, trying to calm the growing dread in my chest. The host raised a gloved hand, almost in a wave, and then pointed directly at the camera. "Welcome," they said, their voice distorted and layered, as if multiple people were speaking at once. The sound sent shivers down my spine. "You've made it this far, Alex. That means you're ready." My blood ran cold. How did they know my name? I had taken every precaution to remain anonymous. VPNs, encryption, everything. It wasn't possible for them to know who I was. The host tilted their head further, as if amused by my silence. "Don't be shy," they continued. "You came here for answers, didn't you? You wanted to see what's on the other side." The chat erupted again. "Alex, stop watching. It's too late now. You're part of it. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, shaking. I typed into the chat for the first time. Who are you? The host's head snapped upright, and they leaned closer to the camera. The movement was sudden, almost predatory. We are the ones you've always been watching, they replied. And now we're watching you. The screen flickered again, and for a brief moment, I saw something in the reflection of the host's mask, something that made my stomach drop. It wasn't the room in the stream. It was my room. I froze, my mind racing. This had to be a trick, some kind of clever manipulation. But the reflection was unmistakable. My desk, my laptop, the dim glow of my bedside lamp. It was as if the host was standing in my apartment, staring directly at me. The host laughed softly, the sound distorted and hollow. You shouldn't have come here, Alex, they said. You opened a door you can't close. I glanced around my room, my pulse pounding in my ears. Everything looked normal, but the air felt heavier, suffocating. The whispers from the stream seemed to bleed into reality, faint and indistinct but unmistakable. On the screen, the host stepped back, disappearing into the shadows. The light bulb flickered violently, casting chaotic patterns across the room. The camera panned to the doorway, where the figure from earlier stood waiting. Its skeletal hand gripped the frame, its head tilting at an unnatural angle as it stared directly at the camera. The chat went wild. Alex, get out. It's in your house now. Too late. I typed again, my fingers trembling. What do you want? The host's distorted voice replied, echoing faintly from both the stream and the room around me. We want you to see. The camera glitched, and the feed cut to a new scene. My heart stopped. The room on the screen was no longer the empty, concrete space from before. It was my room. Every detail was identical. The coffee mug on my desk, the pile of papers, the slight crack in the paint on the wall. The camera slowly panned across the space, as if searching for something. For me, I shot up from my chair, backing away from the screen. My instinct screamed at me to run, to get as far away as possible. But I couldn't bring myself to leave. The thought of what might happen if I turned my back on the stream was even more terrifying. The host's voice returned, louder this time. You see, Alex, they said, this isn't just a stream. This is your life. And now, everyone's watching. The chat filled with cryptic messages. You're part of the show now. There's no turning back. The stream is live, Alex. I glanced at the screen, and that's when I saw it. The camera in the stream turned toward the doorway, where the figure stood. Its long, skeletal fingers reached for the handle, turning it slowly. In my apartment, the door to my bedroom creaked open. The creak of my bedroom door was deafening in the silence. My head snapped toward the sound, my breath catching in my throat. The door was ajar, just enough for the shadows from the hallway to spill into the room. My heart hammered as I turned back to the screen. The stream mirrored my exact surroundings. Every detail of my room was there, including the slightly open door. But the stream's camera moved differently, deliberately. It panned across the room with an unnatural smoothness, almost like it was searching for something. The skeletal figure from before was no longer in the frame, but I could feel its presence. The chat began to flood with frantic messages. The door is open. It's already inside. Alex, look closer. I didn't want to. Every instinct screamed at me to turn off the stream, to leave my apartment, to get away from whatever I had invited into my life. But something kept me rooted to the spot. It wasn't just fear. It was the feeling that if I looked away, I'd lose whatever slim chance I had of understanding this nightmare. The camera on the stream zoomed in on the door. There was a pause, a silence that felt heavier than anything I'd experienced before. Then, faintly, the whispers returned. They weren't just coming from my laptop anymore. They were in the room with me. I grabbed my headphones, hoping to isolate the sound, but it only made things worse. The whispers were distorted, layered, like hundreds of voices speaking at once. I strained to make out the words, my pulse racing. Amid the chaos, certain phrases emerged. See the truth. It's too late. Watch closely, Alex. The camera glitched, the screen filling with static for a split second before resolving into a new image. My breath hitched as I realized what I was looking at, a series of symbols etched into the walls of the room on the stream. They weren't there before, and yet they felt familiar, as if I'd seen them somewhere deep in my memory. I took a screenshot, my hands trembling, and opened the image in a photo editor. Zooming in, I tried to decipher the symbols. They were jagged, almost like scratches, but there was a rhythm to them, a pattern. The more I stared, the more they seemed to shift, as if the lines themselves were alive. The whispers grew louder, merging into a single phrase that repeated over and over. "You've seen them before." And then it hit me. The symbols weren't new. They were the same ones I had seen in the reflection of the host's mask earlier. They had been there all along, hidden in plain sight. Panic set in as I realized the symbols weren't just random markings. They were coordinates. Not geographic, but digital lines of code, an address buried deep within the metadata of the stream. The realization sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't just a random broadcast. It was a message, and I was its intended recipient. I typed furiously into the chat. "What do the symbols mean? Why am I seeing this?" The response came immediately, not from the chat but from the host's distorted voice. "You're part of the system now. Keep watching, and you'll understand." The screen flickered, and a new set of images appeared. They were photos, dozens of them, scrolling past at a dizzying speed. My hand shook as I realized the photos were of me, taken from angles I couldn't explain, some in my apartment, others in places I didn't even recognize. The chat exploded. "Alex, don't look at them. It's too late. You're in the archive now." My head spun as I scrolled through the images. Each one was time-stamped, the date stretching back years. But the most chilling part was that the photos weren't just of me. They showed people I knew, friends, family, coworkers. The deeper I looked, the more I saw faces I didn't recognize. I opened one of the images and noticed something strange in the background. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but there was a shadow, tall, thin, and skeletal, like the figure from the stream. It had been there all along, hidden in my life, waiting. The whispers grew louder, drowning out my thoughts. "You've always been watching. Now we're watching you." I slammed my laptop shut, the sound echoing in the room. But the whispers didn't stop. The room grew colder, the shadows on the walls shifting unnaturally. I grabbed my phone, desperate to call someone, anyone, but the screen was filled with static. Suddenly, my laptop powered back on by itself. The stream resumed, and the host was back. They stood motionless in the center of the room, their mask tilted slightly as if they were staring directly at me. "You can't leave, Alex," they said, their voice softer now, almost gentle. "You've come too far. Keep watching, and you'll understand everything." The chat filled with a single phrase, repeated over and over. "See the truth." My screen glitched again, and the camera in the stream turned toward the open door in my room. The skeletal figure stood there, its head tilting as it took a step closer. My breath caught in my throat as the light in my room flickered. The whispers merged into a deafening roar. "You're part of the stream now." The roar of the whispers abruptly stopped, leaving an oppressive silence that was somehow worse. My screen showed the skeletal figure standing in my doorway, its elongated form distorted as if it didn't belong in this world. The host's mask glinted faintly in the flickering light on the stream, as though watching both me and the figure simultaneously. The chat came alive again, and my blood ran cold as I read the messages. "It's closer now, Alex. You can't run anymore. We've always known you." This wasn't just a broadcast for entertainment or horror. Somehow it was deeply personal, like the entire stream had been tailored for me. The realization made my chest tighten. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling, before I forced myself to type. "What do you want from me?" The response didn't come from the host. It came from the chat, line after line pouring in faster than I could read. "We want you to see. We want you to stay. We've been waiting." As I stared at the chaotic flood of messages, I noticed something horrifying. The usernames of the chat participants were eerily familiar. They were the names of people I knew, friends, co-workers, even my family. I scrolled frantically, my mind racing. Was this a coincidence? A cruel trick? But the more I scrolled, the more names I recognized. My hand shook as I typed again. "Who are you?" The host leaned closer to the camera, their head tilting in that unnatural way. "We're everyone you've ever known, Alex," they said, their voice distorted and layered. "And now we're everyone who knows you." I felt a wave of nausea as the chat exploded once more. The names were all there, their messages growing increasingly personal. We remember what you did, Alex. Why didn't you tell us? You can't hide from us. I scrambled to close the tab, but the screen froze, locking me in place. The whispers returned, faint at first, then rising into a cacophony of overlapping voices. It wasn't just one voice or even a few. It was a chorus of hundreds, all saying different things but somehow in perfect harmony. You're ours now. Stay with us. The stream is live. The skeletal figure took another step forward in the stream, and at the same time, the shadows in my room shifted. I turned my head, my heart pounding, and for the briefest moment, I thought I saw movement in the corner of my eye. I whipped my head back toward the screen, and my blood turned to ice. The host was no longer on the stream. The camera now focused entirely on my room, the skeletal figure inching closer to where I sat. My reflection appeared faintly in the screen, overlaid with the grainy feed of the stream. The chat continued its relentless flood of messages. Do you see it, Alex? It's right behind you. Turn around. Couldn't move. My muscles felt frozen, paralyzed by fear. I wanted to tell myself it wasn't real, that this was just an elaborate trick. But the air in the room felt wrong, heavy, electric, and freezing cold. Suddenly, the host's voice crackled back to life, echoing through both the stream and my room. You've been watching us for so long, Alex. Now it's our turn to watch you. The screen glitched violently, the image warping and distorting. When it cleared, the camera was focused directly on me. Not just my room, not just my setup, but me. I could see myself on the screen, sitting at my desk, frozen in terror. The skeletal figure was no longer on the stream. My reflection was alone. The chat lit up with new messages. You're in the stream, Alex. They've been waiting for you. You're part of it now. I felt my body start to tremble. My laptop speakers emitted a low, guttural hum that vibrated through the room. The light above me flickered wildly, casting erratic shadows that danced across the walls. I typed frantically into the chat, "How do I stop this?" The reply was immediate, simple, and chilling. You can't. The screen flickered again, and the camera panned across the room. My reflection was still visible, but the skeletal figure had returned. It stood in the shadows behind me, its bony fingers reaching out, its head tilted as if studying me. The host's voice echoed through the room, soft and mocking. You've been watching all your life, Alex. You've always wanted to know what's behind the screen. Now you're finally part of it. The skeletal hand reached closer on the screen. At the same time, I felt the faintest touch on the back of my neck, cold, sharp, and impossibly real. I screamed and spun around, but there was nothing there. My room was empty, silent except for the low hum coming from my laptop. When I turned back to the screen, the stream had changed again. It now showed a new scene, an empty chair and a desk, illuminated by the faint glow of a monitor. My desk, my chair, and the chat was still going. Welcome to the stream, Alex. We're all watching you now. It's your turn. The stream had shifted entirely to my room, my chair, my desk, my monitor. Everything was framed perfectly, as if someone had placed a camera just behind me. The glow of the screen in the stream mirrored my own, the same faint light casting eerie shadows on the walls. My breath quickened as I stared at it, unable to look away. The chat came alive with a horrifying energy. We're all here. Don't look away, Alex. It's just starting. I glanced around my apartment, my pulse pounding in my ears. The air was thick, heavy, and felt alive. Every shadow seemed deeper, every sound amplified. The whispers that had haunted me earlier were gone, replaced by an oppressive silence that made my skin crawl. When I turned back to the stream, the skeletal figure was there again. It stood at the edge of the frame, partially obscured by shadows, its elongated fingers resting on the chair. My chair. My stomach turned as I watched it tilt its head slowly, unnaturally, as though it were listening for something. The camera zoomed in, focusing on the figure's hand. The fingers twitched slightly, and then, with a horrifying slowness, it began to pull the chair away from the desk. My chair in the stream slid back, its legs scraping against the floor. And then I heard it. The exact same sound echoed in my apartment. I spun around so fast my chair nearly toppled over. The real chair, the one I had been sitting in just moments ago, was slightly ajar. Its position shifted. My body froze as cold fear gripped me. I wasn't alone. The chat flooded with new messages, each one worse than the last. It's in your room, Alex. They're watching you now. Turn around again. I didn't want to. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to run, but my legs felt like lead. Instead, I forced myself to look back at the screen. The stream had changed. The skeletal figure was gone, but the camera was now focused on the doorway behind me. The door to my bedroom was slightly open, just enough for the darkness of the hallway to seep through. The faint glow of the stream illuminated the edges, but the space beyond was pitch black. And then the camera started moving. It tilted slightly, panning toward the floor, then back up, as if mimicking the motion of someone stepping forward. My heart hammered as I stared at the stream, trying to convince myself it was just a trick, a coincidence. But the camera's movements were deliberate, slow, and purposeful. It was coming closer. The chat's messages became increasingly frantic. Don't move, Alex. It's right there. Do you see it yet? I wanted to close my laptop to shut off the stream and pretend none of this was happening. But something stopped me. A part of me knew that if I turned away, if I tried to escape, the thing in the stream would follow me. The camera stopped moving. It was now focused on the crack in the door. For a moment, nothing happened. The silence was deafening. Then slowly a shadow appeared, a faint, shifting form in the darkness of the hallway. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible. But as I stared, the shadow grew darker, more defined. A pale, skeletal hand reached into the frame, its long fingers curling around the edge of the door. My chest tightened as I realized the shadow wasn't confined to the screen. It was stretching into my room. The glow of the laptop reflected faintly off the walls, and in the corner of my eye, I saw it, a flicker of movement, a ripple in the shadows that shouldn't have been there. My breath caught in my throat as I forced myself to look directly at the door. Nothing. The door was still, the hallway silent. I turned back to the stream, and my blood ran cold. The skeletal figure was fully in frame now, its head tilted at an impossible angle, staring directly at the camera. At me. The host's voice returned, layered and distorted. Do you understand now, Alex? You've been watching us for so long. It's only fair we return the favor. The figure in the stream raised its hand, pointing directly at the screen. At me. The camera in the stream zoomed in closer, focusing on my face. It wasn't just an image anymore. It was live. The reflection of my terrified expression stared back at me, overlaid with the skeletal figure standing behind me. My body locked in place, my mind racing. This wasn't possible. I reached out, shaking, and typed into the chat. What do you want? The host's voice was calm, almost amused. To bring you home. The chat filled with messages, a relentless cascade of words that blurred together. It's time, Alex. Step into the stream. You can't escape now. The camera in the stream tilted again, this time focusing on the floor. Slowly, it panned toward my feet, showing the same worn carpet I was standing on. I could feel the pull now, a strange magnetic force that seemed to emanate from the screen. The air around me was heavy, charged with static. And then the screen glitched. The skeletal figure was gone. The stream now showed only my reflection, the pale glow of the laptop casting harsh light on my face. The chat fell silent, and the host's voice returned, softer this time. It's your turn, Alex. Step into the stream. I felt the pull grow stronger, my vision blurring as the edges of the room seemed to warp and shift. The shadows in the corners of my apartment began to move again, stretching toward me like tendrils. My body refused to move, my thoughts spiraling into chaos. And then the screen went black. The sudden blackness of the screen plunged my apartment into an eerie silence. My heart was pounding so loudly that it felt like the only sound in the room. For a moment, I thought the stream had finally ended, but the air still felt heavy, charged with something unnatural. I stared at the dark screen, my reflection faintly visible in the dim glow of the laptop. Then the whispers returned. They were no longer faint or distant. They came from everywhere, inside the room, inside my head. Layers of voices, some overlapping, others distinct, speaking words I couldn't understand. The static from the laptop grew louder, blending with the whispers until it was deafening. I slammed the laptop shut, hoping to end the nightmare, but the sound didn't stop. The whispers were still there, echoing in the corners of the room. The light above me flickered violently, casting jagged shadows on the walls. My phone buzzed on the desk, the the screen lighting up with dozens of notifications, all from unknown numbers. I picked it up, my hand shaking, and unlocked it. Every notification was the same. Alex, don't look away. You're part of the stream now. We're waiting for you. My vision blurred, the words seeming to shift and ripple as I stared at them. I dropped the phone, the buzzing continuing incessantly as the whispers grew louder. The room felt smaller now, the walls closing in. I could feel the pressure in my chest, like something was squeezing the air out of my lungs. The edges of my vision darkened, and for a moment, I thought I might pass out. But then something worse happened. The laptop sprang back to life. The screen flickered, displaying static for a moment before the stream returned. But it wasn't showing my room anymore. It was showing us somewhere else. The camera panned across a dark, endless corridor. The walls were rough and uneven, like they had been carved out of stone. The floor was slick, reflecting faint light from an unseen source. At the end of the corridor was a door, old and weathered, its surface etched with the same symbols I'd seen earlier in the stream. The chat came alive again. Go to the door, Alex. It's waiting for you. You know the way. I shook my head, my breaths coming in short, panicked gasps. I didn't know this place. I'd never seen it before. And yet, there was something disturbingly familiar about it. The symbols on the door seemed to pulse faintly, almost like they were alive, beckoning me forward. The camera in the stream began to move, inching closer to the door. My pulse quickened as I felt that strange magnetic pull again, the sensation of being drawn toward the screen. I gripped the edge of my desk, trying to ground myself, but the pull only grew stronger. The whispers began to form words, their cadence slow and deliberate. Follow the stream, Alex. Step through the door. It's your turn. I tried to fight it, tried to remind myself that none of this was real. But as I stared at the stream, I realized something horrifying. The door in the stream wasn't just an image, it was real. Somehow, I could feel its presence, like it was pressing against the edges of my mind. The chat's messages blurred together, their meanings slipping away as my thoughts became harder to hold on to. The stream zoomed in on the door, its surface glowing faintly with that same pulsating energy. And then the host's voice returned, calm and almost soothing. You've always wanted to know what's on the other side, haven't you? You've been watching us for so long, waiting. Now it's time to step through. I pushed myself back from the desk, shaking my head. No, I whispered to no one. This isn't real. It's just a stream. It's just. My voice faltered as the room around me began to distort. The shadows on the walls stretched and twisted, their shapes flickering like static. The light above me dimmed, leaving only the glow of the laptop to illuminate the room. And then I saw it. The door from the stream was here. It wasn't on the screen anymore. It was in my room. It stood where the wall should have been, its weathered surface impossibly real. The symbols etched into it glowed faintly, pulsing in time with the whispers that now filled the room. My body refused to move, my mind unable to process what I was seeing. The host's voice echoed again, louder now, surrounding me. Open the door, Alex. It's the only way out. I shook my head violently, backing away from the door. No, I whispered, my voice trembling. I'm not doing this. The chat exploded with messages. You can't stop now. There's no going back. It's already open. Before I could react, the door creaked open. A blinding light spilled out, cutting through the darkness and flooding the room. The whispers grew louder, their voices forming a single, deafening command. Step into the stream. My body moved on its own, drawn toward the door by an invisible force. The air around me seemed to ripple, pulling me closer with every step. I tried to resist, tried to anchor myself to something, anything, but it was no use. The last thing I saw before stepping through was my reflection on the laptop screen. The chat had gone silent, the only message left blinking at the top. Welcome home, Alex. The light engulfed me as I crossed the threshold of the door, its brilliance so intense that I had to shield my eyes. My body felt weightless, as though I had been pulled out of reality and into something far beyond comprehension. The air was dense and cold, pressing against my skin like static. When the light finally dimmed, I found myself standing in a place that shouldn't exist. It was the corridor from the stream. The walls were jagged and uneven, their surface etched with the same pulsating symbols that had haunted me. The floor glistened with an oily sheen, reflecting faint, flickering light from nowhere. The corridor seemed endless, stretching into a void that devoured everything beyond the reach of the light. And at the far end, the door stood again, waiting. I turned, hoping to find the door I had entered through, but it was gone. The space behind me was nothing but an expanse of black, empty, and oppressive. My chest tightened as panic set in. I was trapped, cut off from the world I knew, stuck in a nightmare I had been watching. The whispers returned, faint at first, then growing louder, swirling around me like a storm. They seemed to come from the walls themselves, their cadence taunting and relentless. "You wanted this, Alex. This is what you've been watching for. Now it's time to see the truth." The symbols on the walls glowed brighter, pulsing in rhythm with the whispers. I moved forward cautiously, the corridor narrowing as I walked. My footsteps echoed unnaturally, each sound distorted and warped. As I approached the door, the whispers grew clearer, almost coherent. "The stream doesn't end here. The source is beyond. Keep going, Alex." I stopped in front of the door, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. The surface of the wood was ice cold, the symbols glowing beneath my touch. For a moment, I hesitated, my mind racing with every terrible possibility. But there was no turning back. I had to know what was behind it. I pushed the door open slowly, the creak echoing unnaturally down the corridor. The light beyond it was dimmer this time, casting long shadows across a room that looked strangely familiar. My heart sank as I stepped inside. It was my apartment. Or at least, it looked like my apartment. The layout was identical, the same desk, the same laptop, even the same coffee mug on the table. But something was off. The air was heavy, the light dim and flickering. The shadows were sharper, deeper, moving in ways that defied logic. The laptop on the desk was already on, its screen displaying the stream. I stepped closer, my legs trembling beneath me. The camera on the stream was no longer focused on the corridor or the skeletal figure. It was pointed at me. I stared at the image of myself on the screen, my reflection pale and distorted. The chat was active again, the messages pouring in faster than I could read. "Welcome back, Alex. The stream never ends. You're the host now." My chest tightened as the realization sank in. The stream wasn't just something I had been watching, it had been watching me. I was never the audience. I had always been the subject. The whispers returned, louder now, forming a single voice. The host's voice. "You've seen the surface, Alex," it said. "Now it's time to see the source." The camera on the stream began to glitch, the image warping and twisting before resolving into something new. It was no longer showing my room. Instead, it displayed a massive server room, rows of blinking lights stretching into infinity. The servers hummed with power, their presence almost alive. The chat lit up again. "The source is here. Find it, Alex. You're part of it now." I stared at the screen, my mind reeling. The servers weren't just machines. They were alive, pulsating with the same energy as the symbols on the walls. They were the source of the stream, the beating heart of the nightmare I had been dragged into. The whispers grew louder, overlapping into a deafening roar. "Come closer, Alex. See the truth. Become the stream." Suddenly, the laptop screen went black, the room plunging into darkness. The only light came from the symbols on the walls, their glow casting eerie shadows that moved independently of the flickering light. I turned back to the door, desperate to escape, but it was gone. The room was sealed, the walls closing in around me. The whispers became a cacophony, their voices pulling at my mind, my thoughts slipping away like sand through my fingers. The host's voice returned, louder and more commanding than before. "There's no escape, Alex. You've always been part of the stream. Now it's time to join us fully." The symbols on the walls pulsed violently, their glow almost blinding. The room began to spin, the shadows coalescing into a single, towering form. It was the skeletal figure, its hollow eyes glowing faintly as it loomed over me. I fell to my knees, my body trembling as the figure reached out, its elongated hand brushing against my forehead. A surge of cold shot through me, and my vision blurred. The whispers quieted, replaced by a single phrase spoken softly but with absolute finality. "You are the stream." The next thing I knew, I was back at my desk. My apartment was normal again, the light steady, the air no longer oppressive. For a moment, I thought it had all been a dream. But when I looked at my laptop, the stream was still live. It was showing me. The chat was still active, thousands of anonymous viewers typing frantically. "Welcome to the stream, Alex. We're all watching. You're one of us now." And in the corner of the screen, I saw my reflection. My face was pale, my eyes hollow. And behind me, the skeletal figure stood, its hand resting lightly on my shoulder. The skeletal figure's hand felt cold, like frost seeping through my skin, even though I knew it wasn't physically there. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen, where my reflection sat frozen, mirroring my terror perfectly. Behind me, the figure's hollow eyes glowed faintly, pulsing in time with the whispers that still echoed faintly in my ears. The host's voice returned, smooth and deliberate. "You've seen the stream, Alex. You've walked through its doors, and now you understand. But there's one final step." I forced myself to speak, my voice shaky and weak. "What do you want from me?" The figure in the reflection tilted its head in response, and I felt the weight of its gaze settle on me, even though I couldn't see its face directly. The host chuckled softly, the sound layered and distorted. "We don't want anything, Alex. We want you to choose. Stay with us, or go back to a world that will never understand what you've seen." The chat erupted, the messages flooding the screen. "Choose wisely, Alex. You can't go back now. The stream is forever." My pulse quickened as I stared at the chat. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to shut the laptop, to run, to leave this nightmare behind. But something held me back. The pull of the stream was stronger now, like a tide dragging me deeper into its depths. The host's voice continued, calm and measured. "You've always been curious, haven't you? Always wanted to know what lies beyond the screen. Now you have the chance to find out. Step forward, Alex. Be part of something greater." The stream flickered, and the server room appeared again. The rows of blinking lights seemed brighter now, pulsing in unison with the host's words. At the end of the endless corridor of servers, a chair sat waiting, surrounded by cables and monitors. The symbols from before glowed faintly on the walls, their edges rippling like static. The host continued. "This is the source, Alex. Everything begins and ends here. If you join us, you'll understand. You'll see what lies beyond time, beyond space, beyond the veil." I shook my head, trying to clear the fog that clouded my thoughts. "I don't want this," I whispered. "I didn't ask for this." The figure in the stream stepped closer to the camera, its skeletal hand reaching toward the lens. "But you did, Alex," the host said. "You clicked. You watched. You invited us in. The stream isn't just ours, it's yours too." The camera zoomed in on the chair, its dark leather worn and cracked, the wires snaking around it like veins. The chat continued its relentless flood. "Sit in the chair, Alex. It's your turn now. Join the stream." The whispers in my room grew louder, merging into a low hum that vibrated through my body. The light above me flickered wildly, casting shadows that seemed to dance and twist around the room. I felt like I was being suffocated, the weight of the stream pressing down on me. I forced myself to stand, my legs trembling beneath me. "What happens if I say no?" I asked, my voice barely audible. The host tilted their head, the movement almost playful. "You already know the answer," they replied. "The stream never stops, Alex. Whether you watch or join, it's always there." The skeletal figure's reflection disappeared from the screen, and for a moment, I thought it was over. But then the camera shifted again, focusing on me directly. My reflection stared back, hollow-eyed and pale, but there was something wrong. My reflection smiled. I stumbled back, nearly knocking over my chair. My real face hadn't moved. I was sure of it. But the version of me on the screen grinned, its expression cold and unnatural. The chat filled with laughter, the words mocking me. "See? You're already part of us. You can't escape yourself. Welcome home." The host's voice softened, almost sympathetic. "You've been part of the stream since the moment you clicked, Alex. There's no turning back. But if you sit in the chair, you'll finally understand. You'll see the truth." I felt a tear roll down my cheek as I stared at the laptop, my mind racing. I couldn't go back, not really. Even if I shut the laptop, even if I ran, the stream would follow me. The symbols, the whispers, the shadows, they were part of me now. The host's voice became a whisper, soft and inviting. "Come home, Alex. The stream is waiting." The light in my room dimmed further, the shadows growing deeper, thicker, until they swallowed everything except the faint glow of the laptop. The server room on the stream flickered again, the chair at its center now bathed in light. The skeletal figure stood behind it, its hand resting on the backrest as though waiting for me to take my place. I reached out to close the laptop, but my hand froze inches from the screen. The pull was too strong, the whispers too loud. My reflection smiled again, its hollow eyes locking onto mine. And then the host spoke one final time. "It's your choice, Alex. Be the stream or be consumed by it." The host's final words echoed in the room, reverberating through my mind as the shadows seemed to pulse in time with my racing heartbeat. Be the stream or be consumed by it. The laptop's glow illuminated the room faintly, its light flickering as though struggling to stay alive. On the screen, the skeletal figure stood behind the ominous chair in the endless server room, its long, bony fingers curling over the backrest. The symbols on the walls pulsed faintly, their jagged edges seeming to shift and ripple, as though they were watching me too. The whispers grew louder, merging into a single, chilling chant. "Choose, Alex. Choose." I tried to think, to reason, but my thoughts were fragmented, slipping through my grasp like water. My body felt heavy, tethered to the room, unable to move. The host's voice returned, softer now, almost compassionate. "You've already seen it, Alex. You felt it. The stream isn't just something you watch, it's something you've always been part of. You belong here." I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. "No," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I don't want this. I didn't ask for this." The skeletal figure on the screen tilted its head, its hollow eyes glowing faintly. The host chuckled, a distorted sound layered with mockery. "You clicked. That was enough." The chat flooded with new messages. "It's time, Alex. You can't run anymore. You are the stream now." I felt the pull grow stronger, the magnetic force dragging me closer to the screen. My hand twitched involuntarily, moving toward the keyboard as if guided by some unseen force. I fought against it, clenching my fists, but the effort left me drained. The camera on the stream zoomed in on the chair, its dark surface gleaming under the pulsing light. The skeletal figure stepped aside, leaving the seat empty, waiting. The host's voice returned, quieter but more insistent. "Sit, Alex. Take your place. You've always been part of this. It's time to embrace it." The air in the room grew colder, the oppressive atmosphere pressing against my chest. The whispers seemed to crawl into my ears, their words echoing in my mind. "You belong here. It's where you've always been. The stream is forever." I glanced around, desperate for something, anything, to break the hold the stream had on me. But the shadows had consumed the room entirely, leaving only the faint glow of the laptop. My reflection stared back at me, its hollow-eyed grin widening unnaturally. "Why me?" I asked, my voice barely audible. The host's response was immediate, chilling in its simplicity. "Because you watched." My hands moved on their own, typing a single word into the chat. "What?" The screen flickered violently, the image warping and distorting before resolving into a new scene. It was no longer the server room. It was me. My own face stared back at me, but it wasn't just a reflection. It was alive. My duplicate spoke, its voice layered with the host's distortion. "You're one of us, Alex. You always have been. The stream isn't something you find, it's something that finds you." The skeletal figure stepped into the frame behind my duplicate, its hollow eyes glowing brighter now. The host's voice and my duplicate's voice spoke in unison. "There's no escape. You are the stream." The chat erupted into chaos, messages flooding the screen faster than I could read. "Join us, Alex. You're already here. The stream never ends." I stood frozen, my mind racing, my body trembling as I stared at the screen. The whispers reached a deafening crescendo, the light from the laptop pulsating with every word. My reflection raised a hand and pointed directly at me. And then the host spoke again. "Sit in the chair, Alex, or let the stream consume you." My knees buckled, and I sank to the floor, tears blurring my vision. I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. The weight of the decision pressed down on me, suffocating and relentless. I knew what they were asking. If I sat in a chair, if I joined them, I might find answers, horrifying answers, but answers nonetheless. But if I refused, I didn't want to imagine what would happen if I refused. The skeletal figure stepped forward on the stream, its hollow eyes locking onto mine. The host's voice softened, almost gentle. It's not the end, Alex. It's the beginning. The stream is eternal. And now, so are you. My body moved on its own, drawn toward the laptop. The screen flickered again, the server room reappearing with the empty chair at its center. The symbols on the walls glowed brighter, their patterns shifting and twisting like living things. I reached for the keyboard, typing one final message into the chat. I don't want this. The host's voice replied instantly, echoing through the room. It's not about what you want, Alex. It's about what you are. The chair on the screen loomed closer, its presence overwhelming. The skeletal figure stood beside it, motionless, waiting. My reflection smiled one last time, its hollow eyes boring into mine. The chat slowed, the final message blinking at the top of the screen. Welcome to the stream, Alex. I felt the pull grow stronger, the light from the screen consuming everything around me. My vision blurred as the whispers reached their peak, their voices merging into one final command. Beat the stream. And then everything went dark.